Hey everyone, welcome back to GIMME Growth. Today we're talking about email outreach. This is probably my favorite growth strategy ever. I've used this to grow every single startup I've run and even advised. There's almost always a good use case for a good outbound strategy. Let's dive in. Outbound is great for many reasons, but these are some of my favorite. 1, it's the most direct way to get in touch with who you want to talk to. 2, it's completely transparent. You know that the message reached the prospect. 3, it's insanely quick feedback loop. 4, it's basically free, outside of the collecting emails and the time to craft the message. Many people shy away from email outreach because it feels spammy or salesy, but it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it shouldn't. A major misconception is that email outreach is only for sales. It's not. The goal of outreach is actually not to sell at all. You can't sell anybody in an email. It's just to start the conversation. So your entire goal is just to get the other person to reply. With such a simple goal, this makes email super versatile. It can be used for all these things: to find your first customers, to find influencers to promote your product, to find partners that will market your product to their customers, to get press, to get investors even, and of course, sales. Because these emails are specific, they aren't spam. When done right, they are highly relevant to the recipient. So you have to be comfortable in sending. You have to ask yourself, would I mind getting this email? To best explain that, let's first discuss what makes a bad email, because sadly, most emails are bad. Here's an example of a bad email. Hey person, I'm excited to sell you something. I really think you'll like it because it does A, B, and even C. Want to buy it? So this is an exaggerated example, but I'm pointing out here that the reason it's bad is it tries to sell you. It talks about what, not why, and it's very generic. But there's still hope. Emails can be good, even great. They just have to have these characteristics. They have to be conversational, meaning they seem like they're sent from a real person. There has to be context around it. They have to be brief and structured. The information architecture has to be there and has to be clear so somebody understands specifically what you want. And I really stress it should always end with a question. Let me explain more about context and deduction. Context is a relevant topic, why you're reaching out. Deduction is the statement that follows it that makes it seem impossible that it's an automated email. Let me explain this in this example. Hi Roger, love your blog post on the iPhone 7 yesterday. That's the context. It's hyper relevant, it's date sensitive, it gives context to the reader as to why you're reaching out. The deductive statement here is, couldn't agree more, not using USB-C is such a mistake. Now, it would be very hard for a machine to spit this out because the deductive statement here means that the person has actually read the article. So the person who's reading it thinks this has to be a real person, meaning there's a higher likelihood that they're going to reply. Now, this may seem very manual, but it can all be automated too, and I'll show you how to do that later. So now let's go through some emails that I believe are crafted in a great way that would actually drive responses. The first one for this is an example from Talkable, where I'm trying to get my first customers. Hi Kristen, I've been peeping your referral program because I'm obsessed with referral programs. So much so that I recently built a software tool specifically to make scaling referral programs into a viable channel. I like your incentive of, insert incentive here, but notice a few things based on all my research you could do better. I'm of course looking for people to use my tool, Talkable, but I'm happy to just point out my thoughts and help make your program better and have a wider reach, regardless of whether or not you want to try us or not. Would you like to chat referrals later this week? The reason I think this is a good email is because it shares my motives, I'm providing value, it's clear that I did my research, and of course, most importantly, it ends with a question. Notice that I didn't include any slide decks or any sales material or anything here because I'm not trying to sell the person. I'm literally just trying to get them to reply. Some level of curiosity is really important. Let's move on to the influencer. Now I'm trying to get somebody to write about my meal tracking app. Hi Abe, I really like your last video on fitness tracking apps. I too have a problem opening and recording all the details of what I eat. So annoying. So much so that I built a more automated way to do this just by snapping a picture of my meal. I think it's going to be huge based on the feedback I've gotten. I'd love to give you an early look before I go public. You're clearly an expert and your feedback would be huge. Would you like a beta download link? Now, the reason I believe this is a good email is it references their work already and it links to it. So it shows that I know the video. It asks for their opinion, not sales. I'm not asking them to write about or talk about my thing yet. And it ends with an exclusive offer. Now this influencer sees that there might be something that is in it for them and there's a little bit of fear of missing out. For partners, let's pretend that I've built an app that helps old people travel around the world together and fulfill their dreams of traveling if they've never done it. Hi Monica, I'll admit I found you on LinkedIn and I'm cold emailing you. but only because I think you'll find value in how my company, Worldly, helps seniors explore the globe with other travel-minded seniors. I got the idea when my mom kept talking about travels, but was too afraid to go by herself. We've helped 300 plus seniors see destinations they never would have seen, and I think AARP would be the perfect partner for us. I think this partnership would be a value add and economic home run for y'all. Can I share more with you in a short call? Why do I think this is a good email? It's honest, it doesn't share too much information, it hints at some sort of economic benefit, and of course, it ends with a question. So press. The key here is to keep it super short and to the point. Hi Devin, you wrote this post about how annoying the Apple Music photo shut-off is. Totally agree. But there is a solution. I built it over the last few months. I think your readers would want to know. Can I give you a sneak peek this week before I go on product hunt? The main thing with press is to use fear of missing out. This is short, it shows I know his stuff, and I know my stuff, and of course, it ends with a question. Investors. Emailing investors is rough. Usually you should get a referral, not a referral from another VC unless they've invested. Usually the best intros are those from founders who they've invested in. But let's say I have to do cold outreach. Hey Oren, I noticed you invested in Talkable. Thus, I'm writing you because our tool complements them well. We're in the loyalty space and have many of the same customers like Bonobos and Hotels.com. We're about to start our seed extension so we can ramp up on hiring salespeople to sell our product that is already working well. 2% churn. Would you be open to a 20-minute conversation this week? The reason I think this is a good email is because I did the homework. I showed the relevance, meaning there's other companies that are tied into his investment thesis. I increased the greed by showing the customers that we're working with. I reduced the fear by showing the 2% churn. And of course, it ends with a question. And of course, sales. Email is one of the best tools for sales. Hi Noah, notice that you have Optimizely installed. Yes, I'm peeping your source code. I work at growthhackers.com and we have a new tool that integrates with Optimizely to help brands like Loot Crate and Canva map out all those experiments to high-level objectives. Do you ever feel like your experiments aren't closely tied enough to objectives, or that learnings aren't recorded well enough for everyone to know about? If so, I'd love to share how to help you do tighter growth mapping. Would you like to riff about growth strategy for 20 to 30 minutes this week? The reason I think this is good is it gives context, meaning Optimizely. It shares credibility the customers that we're working with. It provides the objective, helping them map their experiments to their objectives, and it offers value, meaning I'm willing to just talk about growth strategy without a sale. And of course, last time I'll say it, it ends with a question. Now, one of the problems with all these emails is people might not respond after the first email. Actually, most people won't respond until the third or fourth email, which puts us in a pretty weird place. It means we have to send a lot of emails in a very clever, non-spammy way. I'll show you how to do this, but you have to remember this is very tricky and it's very easy to possibly irritate a person and actually do your brand harm. So remember not to be annoying. It's very hard to do. I like to call this being charmingly persistent. And the sequences I'm about to show you, I've implemented in about 30 companies, and all except one or two, I've had really good results. In order to share all this, once again, I wrote you a manual. Outreach for startups. The first step is to define your targets. Build a persona around them. Craft the value prop. Then build messaging to match that value prop into the sequence that I'm speaking of. Find the contact info, personalize that list, trigger and monitor so that you can optimize, handle all of the responses, and then operationalize. Let's get started and we'll go through each one of these steps. So the first thing is you want to define your targets. I believe in account-based selling. This means that you find the account that most closely matches who you're trying to sell to. Now, if you're not doing sales, the account could be a press outlet. It could be an investment firm. It could be an influencer. Basically, you want to find the account or the role of the person that you're reaching out to. Then you want to build the persona. What do they do? How do they spend their days? What is their number one problem? What do they read? This may sound familiar to early traction. It is. Where do they hang out? What are their influences? After you've built the persona, then you have to craft your value prop. Here, all that really matters is figuring out what they care about. What is their outcome? What motivates them? What are their questions? How do you make those questions into sound bites that you can answer? Identify their real needs, not their topical ones. Once you've done that, you can craft a messaging sequence. I never believe that one solution works for everyone, but I have found that this sequence generally works as a framework that many startups can follow. On the left-hand column, you'll see the day that you send it. In the right-hand column, you'll find the voice of the email. These are not the subject lines, this is just the voice of the email. On the first day, day 0, you send your intro message. Now, this is probably one of the 6 messages that I showed you earlier, but custom tailored to you. Now, if they don't reply, they progress to the next step of this drip. And on day 3 or 4, you say, hey, did you get this? And you send it as a reply, meaning it bumps the original message up with your new message so that there's context underneath your new message. On day 7 or 8, you say, hey, I tend to send short emails. Maybe you don't get why I'm writing out. This is your longer sales-based email. Maybe you want to include bullet points because at this point it's probably not clear and it's safe to send a salesier email. Day 10, you say, hey, I still notice you haven't replied. Is there a different person in the organization I can write to? And if they still haven't replied in 15 or 16 or 17 days, you say something that triggers something psychological in them, which is, hey, did I do something wrong in trying to reach out to you? Now, sending all these emails feels pretty uncomfortable. And if you do this in an annoying way, you will get unsubscribes, you will get marked as spam, and that's somewhat inevitable sometimes anyway. But if you craft your messages the right way, there's a really good chance that people are going to reply along this entire path. Once you have all that built, now it's time to find their contact info. I like to use LinkedIn Advanced Search, and I like to look at what their title is and what the company is, and make sure that it's set to current. Once I have that, I can use tools like Twofer or Email Hunter to find the actual email addresses. Now, Twofer is actually giving everybody credits for this course, so I'll include that in the tools section. Email Hunter is a simple Chrome extension you can plug in. No tool for finding emails is perfect, but they're good at triangulating and starting to guess. Then, once you get your list, you want to make sure you run it through a tool like Kickbox in order to verify all of the emails, because you don't want to send emails out from your domain that are going to bounce. Once you have all the contact info, you compile it into a spreadsheet, and then you start to personalize it. What you'll notice here is that my spreadsheet has more columns than just name and email. I also have, more importantly, the connection blurb. This is something where I manually go through and I write down what we have in common or what my deductive statement is. Do you remember that email where I was talking about the iPhone 7 and the USB-C? This is where I would write that statement. And then I would use this as a merge tag in my automated email sequence so it looks like it's personalized. There's a great tool called ProLeads that you can use that will automate most of this for you when you reach that level. Then you want to actually trigger and monitor your emails. Now, there's many tools that do this, and most of them tie directly into your Gmail account so that you can send it directly from Google Apps. There's Reply App, there's Outreach. Sujan Patel, who's teaching our content series, has a great tool called Connector that's only $9 a month. If you're new to Outreach, I highly suggest you just start with his tool as it handles most of it. And once you escalate and you really get serious about your game, you can move to SendBloom or Outreach. It's also really important that you use mail-tester.net. That will be in the footnotes to test your email score, because if your emails aren't getting delivered, there's no point in sending them. Just remember, the best tool is the one that you're actually going to use. Finally, after you've sent emails out, you want to optimize. It's really important to send emails out in small batches. I suggest doing 50 to 200 a day. Notice the difference between these two campaigns. One had a connection blurb, one didn't. There's literally almost double the reply rate of the one that did. That just goes to show you that the context and deduction really drives more responses. And I was able to personalize the subject line, meaning that the open rate was 90% of the one with connections. Finally, you have to already plan out how you're going to handle responses, because once you start triggering emails, if people reply and you don't know how to handle it, you're screwed. So the next steps are you have to be fast, because if you delay, it means that it might be an automated system that sent it out. You have to answer questions, but don't answer too much. You have to send valuable info, but don't try to sell and don't get too excited. And try to get onto a call in one step. Use a plugin like Mixmax to make it easy to schedule your meetings. Finally, the last steps are to operationalize. How can you add leads into a sequence automatically once you know that your list quality is good? How can you outsource the account targeting so you don't have to spend all your time in front of LinkedIn figuring out who's the right account, who's not? What are the commonalities between accounts that are actually buying, or between influencers that are actually going to push, or investors that are willing to have meetings? Outsource the context writing. That means that contextual blurb and the deductive statement. There's many talented content writers that you can outsource this type of thing to. Outsource the optimization. People who understand math figure out what works well and what doesn't. And of course, you can assign the lead handling if you have a sales team. Now, I wouldn't assign the last part to anybody else unless it's something like influencers or sales, because if it's something like investors as a founder, you should be handling that yourself. So in summary, here again are the 10 steps. And now I'll show you the manual that you can use to follow this in the exercise and build your very first outreach, or if you already had an outreach campaign, to optimize your outreach campaigns.